I don't care if it's her 7th birthday, and I don't care how long you claim to have saved up. This is a high-end European boutique, not a downtown thrift store. Security, escort this man and his child out before they upset our actual clientele. The voice of Eleanor Vance, the senior floor manager of Maison de L'Étoile, cut through the hushed, classical music-filled atmosphere of the luxury store like a serrated blade. She stood with her posture rigidly straight, her perfectly tailored designer suit, a stark contrast to the disdain contorting her face. She didn't look at the little girl clutching a hand-drawn birthday card, she only looked at the father. She looked at his faded gray hoodie, his worn-in steel-toed work boots, and the dark skin of his face, and made a split-second, entirely prejudiced calculation that he was nothing more than street trash who had wandered in to enjoy the air conditioning. Welcome back to the channel. If you love stories where toxic, arrogant people are brought to their knees by the very individuals they underestimated, you are in the perfect place. Before we continue, comment which city or country you're watching from. We love seeing our global community in the comments. Now, let's get back to the story. Marcus stood perfectly still on the imported Italian marble floor. His broad shoulders, built by years of grueling manual labor before his life took an astronomical turn, were completely relaxed. He held the small, trembling hand of his daughter, Aaliyah, whose large brown eyes were welling with confused tears. Marcus was a black single father who had known the bitter taste of being judged by his appearance his entire life. Years ago, before the venture capital investments, before the aggressive real estate acquisitions, and before he became the anonymous billionaire ghost behind Vanguard Holdings, he had been a construction foreman. He had worked double shifts in the blistering heat to pay for his late wife's medical treatments. When she passed away, leaving him alone with an infant, Marcus had made a silent vow to conquer the world so his daughter would never have to feel the sting of poverty. He had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. He controlled supply chains, owned commercial high-rises, and had a net worth that eclipsed the GDP of small island nations. But on weekends, he didn't wear Italian silk or bespoke suits. He wore the hoodie his wife had given him and the boots that reminded him of where he came from. He wanted Aaliyah to understand the value of $1, the importance of humility, and the reality of the world. Today was Aaliyah's 7th birthday. For weeks, she had stared at the window at Maison de L'Étoile, mesmerized by a specific, delicate white tulle dress with embroidered gold butterflies. It cost $3,000, a drop in the ocean for Marcus, but a fortune in the eyes of the working-class facade he maintained for their weekend outings. He had promised her they would buy it. They had walked into the store, hand in hand, Aaliyah clutching a colorful, hand-drawn birthday card she had made for him that morning, featuring a crude crayon drawing of the two of them under a big yellow sun. The store was a cathedral of consumerism, dripping in crystal chandeliers, velvet seating, and walls lined with garments that cost more than most people made in a year. The air smelled of white lilies and exclusive perfumes. From the moment Marcus and Aaliyah had crossed the threshold, the microaggressions had begun. The security guard at the door had immediately stiffened, his hand hovering near his radio. The sales associates, dressed in immaculate black uniforms, had suddenly found reasons to organize shelves on the opposite side of the showroom, completely ignoring Marcus as he politely asked for assistance. Marcus had swallowed his pride, maintaining a calm, gentle smile for his daughter. He understood the architecture of prejudice perfectly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand service. He simply walked toward the dress display, lifting Aaliyah so she could touch the delicate fabric. That was when Eleanor Vance had materialized. Eleanor was a woman who had built her entire identity around proximity to wealth. She wasn't rich herself, but by serving the ultra-wealthy, she believed she had absorbed their status. To her, Marcus was a virus in her pristine environment. She had marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble, and demanded they step away from the merchandise. When Marcus calmly explained that they were there to purchase the dress in cash, Eleanor had scoffed, a wet, ugly sound of pure contempt. Cash? She had mocked, her voice carrying across the silent store, drawing the stares of two wealthy white patrons sipping champagne on a velvet sofa. We don't accept crumpled bills from people looking to play dress-up for a day. This is an exclusive establishment. You are making my VIP clients uncomfortable. Now, I will ask you one last time to leave before I have you thrown out for trespassing. Marcus felt the familiar, hot spike of rage in his chest, a protective fury that demanded he tear the store apart, buy the building on his phone, and fire her on the spot. But he looked down at Aaliyah. She was shrinking behind his leg, her joy entirely extinguished. If he exploded in anger, he would only terrify his daughter and validate Eleanor's racist assumptions. He would become the angry black man they expected him to be. The silent suffering was a heavy, suffocating blanket, but Marcus wore it with the grace of a king. He squeezed Aaliyah's hand, his expression an impenetrable mask of absolute calm. "We are leaving, Aaliyah," he said softly, his voice a deep, resonant rumble that completely ignored Eleanor. But as they turned to leave, the situation was about to escalate from a quiet humiliation into a public spectacle, and the gears of Marcus's cold, calculated justice began to slowly, inexorably turn. The heavy oak and brass doors of Maison de L'Étoile seemed a mile away as Eleanor's piercing voice summoned the store's private security. Two large men in tailored suits, earpieces curled behind their ears, stepped out from the shadows of the designer handbag display. They didn't approach Marcus with the professional courtesy usually afforded to customers. They flanked him like he was a dangerous criminal caught in the act of a heist. The wealthy patrons on the velvet sofas watched with thinly veiled amusement, whispering to each other behind manicured hands. The silence in the store was oppressive, broken only by the aggressive squeak of the security guard's leather shoes on the marble. "Make sure they don't touch anything on the way out," Eleanor commanded, her arms crossed defensively over her chest. "And check the coat pockets. People like this always try to slip something small into their sleeves." Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The air around him seemed to drop in temperature. His jaw tightened so hard his molars ground together, a microscopic physical reaction to an insult so profound it threatened to break his iron restraint. He didn't look at the security guards. He slowly turned his head to lock eyes with Eleanor. His gaze was devoid of the intimidation, fear, or shame she was expecting. Instead, it was the cold, analytical stare of an apex predator observing a particularly loud insect. "Do not touch me," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, chilling register that vibrated in the quiet room. "And do not come near my daughter. We know where the exit is." The guards hesitated, momentarily unsettled by the sheer, unyielding authority radiating from the man in the faded hoodie. But Eleanor sneered, emboldened by her perceived power. "Just get them out of my sight." "The thrift store is 3 blocks down, sir. Try not to get lost." As Marcus turned to walk away, keeping his body positioned between Aaliyah and the guards, the little girl stumbled on the thick edge of an imported rug. She gasped, dropping the hand-drawn birthday card she had been holding so tightly. The folded piece of construction paper fluttered to the floor, landing face up, displaying the bright crayon drawing of Marcus and Aaliyah holding hands under a massive, smiling yellow sun. Before Marcus could bend down to retrieve it, Eleanor took a deliberate, calculated step forward. Her sharp stiletto heel came down precisely in the center of the drawing, piercing the paper and grinding the wax crayon into the marble floor. She looked down at it, then back up at Marcus, her eyes flat and unapologetic. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Store policy. We must dispose of outside trash." Aaliyah let out a small, heartbreaking sob, burying her face into Marcus's side. The internal pain Marcus felt in that moment was indescribable. It was a searing, acidic burn in his stomach, a reminder of every closed door, every suspicious glance, and every unprovoked humiliation he had endured in his life. But he didn't snap, he didn't scream. He reached down, carefully pulled the torn, dirty card from beneath Eleanor's shoe, and gently folded it into his pocket. He picked Aaliyah up, resting her head on his broad shoulder, and walked out through the heavy brass doors into the sweltering heat of the city afternoon. He didn't look back. He carried Aaliyah 3 blocks down to a discreet underground parking garage, far away from the prying eyes of the boutique's valet. He approached a sleek, custom black Maybach parked in a VIP reserved corner. The driver immediately stepped out, opening the rear door. Marcus buckled a still sniffling Aaliyah into her leather seat, kissing her forehead. "It's okay, baby girl. We'll get you a dress 100 times better than that one, Daddy promises." Once the privacy partition was raised, Marcus pulled out his heavily encrypted smartphone. The emotionless, silent suffering of the father was instantly replaced by the cold, calculated wrath of a billionaire CEO. Marcus dialed a private number. It rang only once before being answered by his lead acquisitions attorney, a ruthless corporate shark named Sterling. "Sterling," Marcus said, his voice devoid of any human warmth. "I need you to pull the operational files on Maison de L'Étoile, specifically the flagship store on 5th Avenue." Right away, sir, Sterling replied. If I recall correctly, Vanguard Holdings finalized the silent acquisition of their parent brand, L'Étoile Group, last Tuesday. You are officially the 80% majority shareholder. They are hosting a welcome gala for the new ownership tomorrow night at that exact location. I know, Marcus said, staring out the tinted window at the blurred city lights. I want a complete background check on a floor manager named Eleanor Vance. Pull her HR records, her commission logs, her security footage, everything. I want every complaint filed by minority employees or customers that the brand swept under the rug. I want her entire professional life localized into a single folder on my desk in 3 hours. Understood, Mr. CEO. Shall I have her terminated? No, Marcus said softly, his thumb brushing over the torn edge of the crayon birthday card in his pocket. I'm going to handle Ms. Vance personally. Ensure that the CEO of the L'Étoile Group is present tomorrow night. And Sterling, make sure my name remains off the guest list until I walk through the door. Marcus hung up. The trap was set. It was time to build a guillotine out of velvet and marble. The following evening, the flagship store of Maison de L'Étoile was unrecognizable. The merchandise had been pushed to the perimeter to make way for a lavish corporate gala. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with silver trays of beluga caviar and Dom Perignon. The attendees were a mix of the city's most elite socialites, fashion influencers, and the top-tier executives of the L'Étoile Group. At the center of it all stood Eleanor Vance. She was dressed in a stunning midnight blue silk gown, a piece she had borrowed from the exclusive reserve collection. She was in her absolute element, mingling with the wealthy, laughing too loudly at their jokes, and positioning herself right next to the brand's global CEO, a nervous-looking Frenchman named Laurent. Tonight was the night the anonymous billionaire owner of Vanguard Holdings was scheduled to make an appearance. Eleanor had spent hours researching how to pitch herself for a promotion to regional director. She envisioned a wealthy, older white gentleman who would be charmed by her aggressive sales tactics and her uncompromising standards of clientele curation. As the string quartet played softly in the background, a sleek black Maybach pulled up to the curb outside. The heavy brass doors were guarded by the same 2 security men from the day before, now wearing earpieces and checking names off a digital tablet. When the doors opened, the atmosphere in the front foyer instantly shifted. It wasn't an older gentleman in a bespoke tuxedo who walked in. It was Marcus. And he was wearing the exact same faded gray hoodie, the same worn-in denim jeans, and the same scuffed steel-toed boots he had worn the day before. He stepped onto the Italian marble, his presence radiating an overwhelming, gravitational authority that caused the conversations near the door to slowly die out. He didn't look at the art. He didn't look at the champagne. His eyes, cold and sharp as obsidian, locked directly onto Eleanor Vance across the room. Eleanor, noticing the sudden hush, turned around. When she saw Marcus, the color completely drained from her face, replaced instantly by a flush of indignant rage. She couldn't believe the audacity. She assumed this street trash had somehow snuck past the valet to cause a scene and extort the store. Her desire to impress the CEO overrode whatever microscopic sense of caution she might have possessed. She marched aggressively across the floor, abandoning Laurent mid-sentence, signaling violently to the 2 security guards. "Are you completely out of your mind?" Eleanor hissed as she approached Marcus, keeping her voice low but venomous so as not to alert the VIPs. "How did you get past the door? This is a private corporate event, you absolute piece of garbage. Guards! I want this man removed immediately, and I want you to call the police. Press charges for trespassing and harassment." The security guard stepped forward, but before they could lay a hand on Marcus, the heavy doors opened again. Sterling, Marcus's lead attorney, stepped in, flanked by 4 massive silent men in dark suits with federal-grade earpieces. They smoothly bypassed the store's security, creating an impenetrable physical barrier around Marcus. Sterling, holding a thick leather folder, stood slightly behind Marcus's right shoulder. Eleanor blinked, her brain struggling to process the sudden influx of highly organized, elite security protecting a man in a dirty hoodie. She looked from Marcus to Sterling, her aggressive posture faltering for the first time. Who are you people?" she stammered, raising her voice slightly. "This is a closed event for Vanguard Holdings." By now, the commotion had drawn the attention of the entire room. The string quartet stopped playing. Laurent, the global CEO, pushed his way to the front of the crowd. His eyes widened in sheer panic as he recognized Sterling, whom he had dealt with during the brutal acquisition negotiations. Laurent practically ran forward, his hands shaking as he bypassed Eleanor entirely. "Mr. Sterling," Laurent gasped, bowing his head slightly. "We? See, we were expecting the majority shareholder. Is everything all right? Has the owner arrived?" Sterling adjusted his glasses, his face a mask of corporate apathy. "He has, Laurent." Sterling took one step back and gestured toward Marcus. "Allow me to introduce Marcus Thorne, founder, CEO, and 80% majority owner of Vanguard Holdings, and by extension, the sole owner of Maison de L'Étoile." The silence in the room was so absolute, you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. Eleanor Vance stopped breathing. Her eyes darted wildly between Laurent, Sterling, and the man in the gray hoodie she had humiliated and thrown out into the street just 24 hours prior. The arrogant, snobby manager who had built her entire identity on judging the wealth of others suddenly realized she had stepped on the neck of a dragon, and the dragon had just woken up. Marcus didn't smile. He simply stared at Eleanor, watching the terrifying realization crash over her, savoring the exact moment her entire world began to burn to the ground. "Marcus Thorne," Laurent stammered, sweat beading on his forehead as he realized the richest man in the room was dressed like a construction worker. "Sir, we had no idea. Your attire. We assumed you would arrive in 2. "I arrived exactly as I did yesterday, Laurent," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the dead silence of the luxury boutique. He didn't look at the CEO. His eyes remained fixed on Eleanor, pinning her to the floor like a specimen under a microscope. "Yesterday, I walked into my store to buy a birthday dress for my 7-year-old daughter. I was carrying cash. I was polite. And in return, your senior floor manager, Ms. Vance, subjected me to a barrage of racial profiling, humiliated my child, ordered her private security to manhandle me, and deliberately crushed my daughter's handmade birthday card under her heel." The wealthy guests began to murmur, stepping slightly away from Eleanor as if her sudden toxicity was contagious. Eleanor opened her mouth, her hands trembling violently. "Mr. Thorne, 2, sir, 2, I, 2, I. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I was just following security protocols. We get a lot of vagrants. WO? I didn't know who you were." "That is exactly the point," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet register. He took a slow step forward. Eleanor instinctively took a step back, her back hitting a display of luxury handbags. "You didn't know who I was. You thought I was a working-class black man with no power, no voice, and no consequence. You thought you could strip me of my dignity because you believed my bank account couldn't defend me. You treat the wealthy like gods, and you treat everyday people like garbage. But true wealth, Ms. Vance, isn't loud. It doesn't need to wear a $3,000 dress stolen from the inventory room to prove it exists." Eleanor gasped, her face flushing crimson as Marcus expertly exposed her theft of the silk gown in front of the global CEO. Marcus held out his hand. Sterling immediately placed the thick leather folder into his palm. Marcus opened it, flipping through the pages without looking down. "Over the past 3 hours, my team audited your entire career, Eleanor. 7 complaints of discrimination from Black and Hispanic customers, all buried by local HR. 3 complaints of wage theft from your minority stockroom employees. You aren't just a snob, you are a liability to my brand." "Please," Eleanor begged, tears finally spilling over her mascara, ruining her pristine makeup. The arrogant facade was entirely shattered. She was a desperate woman begging for her life. "Please, Mr. Thorne, I need this job. My mortgage. I have a lifestyle to maintain. I'll apologize to your daughter. I'll do anything. Please don't fire me." Marcus's expression remained carved from stone. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out the crumpled, torn birthday card, still bearing the dirty imprint of Eleanor's stiletto heel. He walked right up to her, closing the distance, and gently placed the ruined piece of paper into her trembling hands. "You dropped this," Marcus said calmly, "and you are not fired, Ms. Vance. Firing you implies you were an employee of value. You are terminated with extreme prejudice for gross misconduct. I have already instructed legal to freeze your final commissions pending an investigation into your wage theft, and Laurent will be personally blacklisting your name across the entire European luxury retail network." Marcus stepped back, turning to the 2 security guards who were standing frozen in terror. "You two!" Escort Miss Vance off my property. Check her coat pockets. Make sure she doesn't take anything that doesn't belong to her. The poetic justice of the exact command she had used against him being turned on her was the final blow. Eleanor broke down into ugly, loud sobs as the security guards, desperate to keep their own jobs, grabbed her by the arms and practically dragged her across the marble floor. The heavy brass doors closed behind her, shutting her out into the humid city night, permanently exiling her from the world of wealth she worshipped. 6 months later, the flagship location of Maison de L'Étoile on Fifth Avenue was permanently closed. Marcus had relocated the boutique to a smaller, more discreet location. In its place, he had gutted the massive multi-million-dollar real estate space and transformed it into the Vanguard Youth Tech Hub, a state-of-the-art, completely free coding and engineering academy for inner-city minority youth. On the grand opening day, Marcus stood in the lobby wearing his faded gray hoodie, watching hundreds of excited kids boot up high-end computers. Beside him stood Aaliyah, wearing a beautiful, custom-made white dress with gold butterflies, laughing as she typed on a keyboard. As for Eleanor, the industry blacklist had been absolute. Stripped of her luxury connections and facing lawsuits for wage theft, she was forced to take a minimum wage job working the graveyard shift at a fluorescent-lit discount dollar store on the edge of the city. Every time a working-class father walked in holding a child's hand, she looked away, haunted by the ghost of the billionaire in the gray hoodie. Sometimes, the universe doesn't need to shout to deliver justice. It simply allows arrogant people to dig their own graves, handing them the shovel wrapped in velvet. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you loved seeing true karmic justice served cold, hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder to never judge a book by its cover. Until next time, stay humble, stay strong, and always protect your peace.